We've got some new gameplay for Hogwarts Legacy showcasing new uses for some of our spells. We also got a first look at a new mount, extra details from December's gameplay showcase, a potential tease for post-launch content, and way more to discuss. If you are excited for Hogwarts Legacy and enjoy the content here on the channel, then leave a like to help us out, subscribe for way more videos on the game, and let's go. By the way, we are doing a giveaway for the Digital Deluxe edition of the game for a platform of your choice. If you want to participate, check the link in the pinned comment and make sure you are a subscriber of the channel before entering. We will reach out to the winner before launch, so good luck. Before we dive into some of the new clips of gameplay we got to see recently, it's good to know that we're very likely to get at least one final gameplay showcase or big trailer before the launch of the game. Community manager Chandler Wood noted on Twitter that the studio is working on some fun upcoming stuff. And I think I already have an idea on some things we might see there, but we'll get to that in a bit. First, let's go over some new gameplay featuring multiple uses for the Accio spell. We see the player use it in 3 different ways: to grab a piece of paper flying out of their reach, pull a platform and help them in traversal, and once in combat to pull an enemy towards you. So it's a really versatile spell that has uses both in and out of combat, and it's certainly not the only one, because we also got some new gameplay with the fiery Incendio spell in action. And again, what's interesting here is that we get to see the spell used for multiple purposes. First, the player uses it to light a torch on the wall, which I wonder what the exact use for that is, as we should also have access to the Lumo spell to light up darker areas, but maybe these are part of some puzzle similar to the torches you need to light for some of the Nornir chests in God of War. After that, we see the player igniting a Poacher Ranger, and this time the spell also triggers a ring of fire around the player as it hits the enemy. I've mentioned this in a previous video already where we go over more combat details, so I'll leave a link to it in the video description, but I think that ring of fire is part of the game's talent system. Each of your spells can be modified with different talents, and while we've yet to see the system on display, I think this fire circle is one of the talents you can apply to the Incendio spell. Also interesting is that the enemy is part of the Poacher faction, because as we can see in the optional combat objectives, there are also Poacher duelists and executioners. I'm pretty sure you encounter these enemies in beast dens where we can rescue animals to add them to your vivarium. And then the final use we see for the Incendio spell is the player using it to incinerate a giant spider web blocking their path. I'm assuming there are more obstacles we can clear with this spell, or maybe other spells, and in general I think it's really cool to see how some spells have multiple uses. We've seen the different applications for Accio and Incendio, but I imagine many of the game's other spells will be useful for both fights and puzzle solving too. And by the way, we want to do a rundown of all the spells we've seen in the game so far in a future video, so stay tuned for that one. We also got a short clip of new footage from CCXP. It's a bit older, but it's still worth going over as we see the player mounting the massive grab horn and taking them for a ride. There's even some sort of mounted combat as we can see the player charge and run over a pair of goblin enemies on this bridge. Now, we've already seen the grab horn as one of the creatures in our vivarium, and while most of those creatures are unlocked through completing the beast dens I mentioned earlier, I think this beastie is actually one we unlock through the main story. The reason for that is a trophy on the league trophy list called Grappling with a Grab Horn, with a description reading "Subdue the Lord of the Shore." And, well, our first look at a grab horn was from the game's state of play, where we can see the player encountering it on what looks to be a shoreline. Also note how the trophy says subdue, not defeat or kill, so I feel pretty sure this will be one of our main quests. And with a very nice reward, I have to say, because if running over enemies on a mount is half as fun as it was in Ghost of Tsushima, then the grab horn and I are going to become the best of friends. Next to mounts and spells, we also got some more info on potion brewing. We get a preview of the crafting animation where we see the 2 ingredients for a Wiggenweld potion being added to a cauldron. These will be your healing potions for the game, and they're made from combining the magical plant Dittany with Horklump juice. We've already seen Horklumps in the game, you can just come across them when adventuring and pick them up, and I assume the same goes for the Dittany. We also learned the ingredients for the defense enhancing Edgerus potion, which is made from Ashwinder eggs and mongrel fur. And unlike the 2 previous ingredients, I think both of these are drops from enemies. In the recent gameplay showcase, we saw the player flying over a pack of wolf-like creatures where the optional combat objective notes an enemy that's also named Mongrel, which I assume is where we get the skin from. And while Ashwinders are a type of magical snake, there's also a faction of enemies known as Ashwinders, as we saw in the Dark Arts battle arena, so maybe they keep these eggs on their person. So you'll definitely want to do a lot of exploring if you want to stay stocked up on potions, although you can of course buy some of these ingredients at the stores in Hogsmeade too. And speaking of exploration, it looks like we're not just limited to exploring the ground ground and sky surrounding Hogwarts, but also the waters. Now, none of this is confirmed yet, but Redditor Mild Doormat Lover made an excellent post with some of the evidence that hints towards us potentially exploring underwater. First of all is the fact that some of the riverbanks have clear slopes leading into the water, which could be there for no reason, but you'd imagine something like this is there to allow access to a body of water, right? And then there's also the fact that when the player is flying over a watery area, enemy markers can be seen in those places. Now, it could be that it's a swamp and the waters are shallow enough to walk, but then there's also the fact that Mishkapchenko on Twitter noted there are also objective markers in the middle of bodies of water, which adds even more fuel to the fire. And there are of course multiple ways to allow the player to traverse underwater, like gillyweed or certain spells, and considering the amount of water surrounding the castle, I think it makes a lot of sense. The final piece of evidence from that Reddit post is also really interesting, as it points out a detail in some old gameplay that I had completely missed. In our very first look at the Room of Requirement, we can actually see multiple vivariums for us to keep magical creatures. We learned from the most recent gameplay showcase that there will be multiple biomes for us to unlock, and the one on the right here is very clearly water themed. There's even water running down from the ceiling, which leads me to believe that this is either the swamp themed vivarium mentioned by the developers, or even better, a magical aquarium. So again, none of this is confirmed yet, but there is a lot of evidence pointing towards underwater exploration, which is definitely something I expect to see in the next gameplay showcase if it's real. Another thing I think we'll learn more about before the game releases is post-launch content. We do already know there will be no microtransactions in the game, apart from the possibility to access the deluxe edition items like the Dark Arts Battle Arena through a separate purchase. But that does of course not exclude free post-launch content. And an interesting potential hint towards this was actually spotted by Redditor Fancy Agent in the decorations menu for the Room of Requirement. If you look at the icon on the bottom right, it clearly displays a Christmas tree and a jack-o'-lantern, so that would mean there are holiday themed decorations for you to collect. And one way these could be distributed is through several seasonal events, similar to the festivals we saw in Assassin's Creed Valhalla, for instance. Now, it could of course be that we collect these decorations throughout our school year, as we know the seasons will change throughout the story, but that would also mean you'd have to earn them at a specific point in the story. And considering the hype behind the game currently, with it being the most wishlisted game on Steam and the 4th best-selling game on the platform overall, I'd imagine Warner and Avalanche want players to keep coming back as much as possible. We already know you need multiple playthroughs if you want to get the Platinum Trophy, again thanks to that leaked trophy list, as there are separate trophies for reaching a location known as the Map Chamber as a Gryffindor, Hufflepuff, Ravenclaw and Slytherin student. And while we're obviously not going to cover any trophies that might spoil major plot elements, there is one trophy for a side activity that I think might be very important. It's called Merlin's Beard and, surprise surprise, is rewarded for completing all the Merlin trials in the game. The reason I'm bringing this one up is because I think Merlin will be a very important character in the game's story. He's actually already been teased since the game's first reveal, where there's a statue of him and Morgana, another very important old magic user, in the background of this shop. But the main reason I'm bringing this up is the short clip shown at the end of the last gameplay showcase, where the player is being pulled into a mysterious book, which likely belonged to either Merlin or Morgana. YouTubers Expect Go did a great job collecting all the evidence for it, so I'll leave a link to their thread discussing that in the video description. But the main piece of evidence here is that the book in the Headmaster's Chamber, as that's where this scene takes place, is the same one you get with the collector's edition of the game, which means that it has the symbol for ancient magic on the spine and the image of a robed witch or wizard on the cover. The page on display is one we've also seen before as artwork in a behind the scenes video showcasing both dragons and a dark robed magic user with long hair on the second page, which I'm assuming is Morgana. And with her being a dark witch, and the only other example of someone being pulled into a book to relive memories was Tom Riddle's diary, we may well be looking at something similar here. Which would then mean that the book on display also belongs to Morgana and not Merlin. Either way, this artifact seems to play a very important role in the story, again because it's tied to ancient magic, something we ourselves can also tap into, so I'm very curious to see what secrets it holds. When we get more news on Hogwarts Legacy, we will of course let you know here, so subscribe to miss nothing, leave a like if you enjoyed the video, and if you want, you can watch our breakdown of the most recent gameplay showcase by clicking on the screen. I will see you in the next one. Goodbye.